So once again, thanks everybody for coming tonight. We usually do these meetings in person. This is our first event of our 2023 speaker series. But because tonight's presenter is a little bit of a ways from us and has to get up quite early in the morning, we're doing this one online. So thanks everybody for coming out this way. Before we get into tonight's event, just wanted to go over a little bit about our organization. The Middletown Township Historical Society was founded back in 1968. We are all volunteer. We're a 501c3. And as you would expect, we are here to preserve and promote the history of Middletown. So besides events like tonight, we offer a number of other resources, and a lot of them are on our website at middletownnjhistory.org. I wanted to go through some of those. So if you go to our website, you can then link to our YouTube channel where we have a lot of original and exclusive videos. We have our series of Middletown Memories videos, which are interviews with longtime residents or interesting residents. We have a promo video from 1988 that we uploaded just a few months ago. It's pretty interesting. We have a tour of Kings Highway from 1964. And we also have recordings of all of our speaker series, just like the one we're doing tonight. So in case you missed one or want to go back and look, you can do so on our YouTube page. On our website, we also have digitized a number of different publications. We have about 20 Middletown Township High School yearbooks and other student publications. You can search them, you can browse them, and you can also take a look at our newsletters, which date back from the early 1980s all the way up through today. And those are also completely searchable and completely free. And you can find a lot of interesting info in there that you really can't find anywhere else. Also on our website, we have our land development map. By using this, you can find out when your housing development, a local park, cemetery, school was actually developed, and we have them color coded by the different years. And when you click on them, you can see some historical images and maps and other documents. And if anybody ever wants to contribute to this, we'd welcome any help. You can write an entire entry, or you can just give us some tips about how your development or how your school was developed. And also, we have added our archive to our website. This is an ongoing process, so we have about 150 items on there right now. But when you go here, you can search for different items that you might be interested in. You can browse them and you can click on them and get more info. And if you ever have more questions about what we have in the archive, just please let us know and we'll try to answer. So as I said, this is the first edition of our 2023 speaker series. They are held on the fourth Tuesday of each month through November. And typically we hold them in the Middletown Township Public Library and simulcast them online. Some upcoming events in our speaker series. March 28th, we'll have our annual meeting, and then we'll have Dr. Stanley Blair presenting on Henry Morford, who is New Monmouth's own author. He's quite popular in his day, and it's actually his 200th birthday next month, so that'll be interesting. In April, we'll have the premiere of our Middletown Memories video that features Muriel Smith, longtime local historian and journalist. In May, Charlie and Pam Horner will be presenting on the music of Asbury Park's West Side. And in June, Glenn Cashian will be talking about baseball in Freehold. Just want to give a quick thanks to all the people and organizations that make events like this possible. That's all of our volunteers, all of our members, our community sponsors, and all of our supporters. It's definitely appreciated. And if you're interested in supporting us, you can become a member at our website, or you can become a community sponsor at our website. And that's at middletownnjhistory.org. And there you can also send us an email if you'd ever like to volunteer for something, or even if you have some interesting items to donate to our archive. So again, you can keep in touch with us at middletownnjhistory.org or at any of the social media that you see on the screen. So tonight's presenter, Mary Calvi, is a Emmy Award-winning journalist. You can catch her on CBS 2 on weekdays, co-anchoring the morning news. And she is also the author of 2 novels. First one was about George Washington's first love, And the second one is about Teddy Roosevelt's first love. And I'm going to pass it off to Ms. Calvi, who's going to tell you all about her research on that new novel that she has. Mary?
Hello, everyone. Good to see everyone tonight, or at least hear everyone or see your names. It's a pleasure to be with you, and thank you to the Historical Society. It's a great pleasure for me to be with all of you. And honestly, if it wasn't for historical societies like yours, I wouldn't be able to tell these stories. So it's really quite a thrill for me to be with you. And I just want to thank you so much for giving me the chance to talk with you this evening. I wanted to make sure, first of all, that you could see my screen and let's see how we're doing. Everybody okay? You can see me okay?
I can see it. Looks good.
Terrific. So truthfully, what I was really excited about is finding documents. I mean, that's what really inspires me and motivates me when I'm able to find some stories that haven't been told or maybe have been under researched. I think that's what really gets me interested in doing additional research. And honestly, that's what happened here. I had the great opportunity of finding a story about George Washington and his first love, who wasn't Martha, but a woman named Mary, the richest woman in the colonies. And after that, Smithsonian Channel followed my research and produced a documentary based on that. And hence, the interest was there for me to write an additional novel. And I had a bit of a hunch on a story involving Teddy Roosevelt and his first love. Her name was Alice. The reason why I had a hunch is first, I had known the story. Some of you may know it as well. And I really wanted to go back into the archives to see if what I was thinking was true. And let me explain. First, Teddy Roosevelt as the 26th president. There he is on your screen, smiling with those glasses that we all know him with. But many people may not know Theodore Roosevelt as a young man at Harvard College. And there he is, just right to the left of the picture, as Theodore Roosevelt. And that is Teddy Roosevelt at Harvard College. And he's dressed to the nines and he has those wonderful mutton chops. And these are his Harvard pals and how he met his first love, a woman that he says was love at first sight. I went back and looked at his journal entries of the time, and this is what led me to the story that will be the first time I believe that's been told in this way. So in his journal entries, we're just taking a look at just some random ones, but there are so many. He wrote in his diary every day. And it was great to be able to look at these and transcribe them. So here, you see him write wonderful things like, I doubt if any man was ever more happy than I am. I always enjoyed myself, but I have never been so happy as during the last 3 months. He speaks like this over and over again. And in addition to talking about his joy, he talks about Alice and he talks about her over and over and over again. I mean, over 100 times in his journal, Alice is mentioned. And it made me think that maybe those who've researched Theodore Roosevelt were missing something, because so many of the biographers have said that while Theodore Roosevelt had this first love, it was love at first sight, yes, the love letters between them had been destroyed, but a few. The pictures had been destroyed, but a few. And I thought, for a man who speaks of this woman that he's in love with so many times, 100 times, would he destroy the love letters or have somebody destroy the love letters? Or would he treasure them and keep them safe? And so I started my research focusing on Alice. And what I was really excited about is tracking down the letters. There were so many of them, and I was really excited. I transcribed all of them with my dog Lola watching on and waiting for me to be done because it took quite a long time and lots of painstaking effort just to make sure I had every single word right. The letters are really quite incredible, intimate, passionate, and I felt like I was intruding many times. What we're seeing on the left side of your screen is one written by Alice, and she starts out, "My dearest Teddykins. She called him Teddykins, and boy, I was hooked when I saw that one. Some of these letters have seen publication, most have not. And there's another one that I really enjoyed, and that was one from 1880 on the right side of your screen, and it starts, "My dearest love." But he goes on to say some quite passionate things. And here I really love this one. If you just take a look at the right side, it says, "I worship you so that it seems desecration to touch you. And yet when I am with you, I can hardly let you a moment out of my arms, my purest queen. No man was worthy of your love." And he answers it and he ends it as, "Goodbye, my own heart's darling, your loving thee," because she called him thee. I really adore this picture. It has been in some publications before, but I really wanted to show it to you just to give you an idea of the beautiful story that I was finding and exploring. And there is Alice. She is dressed in white there, and she is holding a tennis racket on the lower left side of your screen. She was different than other women were of the time. She played tennis. She was athletic, and she played against men sometimes. She also crashed the gender barrier and went into an all-male social club at Harvard, which was really quite shocking in the day. This is the Gilded Age, 1880. Wasn't something a woman would normally do. She rode in an open cart. She was very active, and she signed her name Alice in the letters rather than Miss Hathaway Lee or later Mrs. Roosevelt. And I bet you could see where Theodore Roosevelt is in this picture. Of course, he is staring adoringly at his Alice. This was a man smitten, and he really was doing everything he could to win her heart. So here's one of the letters, just a little bit more of this letter, because I really think you might enjoy it. On the first page, he starts it with, "My dearest love," but then he says, "At any rate, you will have 2 weeks complete rest at Oyster Bay, and then you shall do just as you please in everything." And everything is underlined. And so the letters went on like this. And there were so many times where I felt like I was intruding on their relationship. These are some letters from Alice. At the center is the Teddykins one, which I just adore. And it was really nice to be able to see even just her handwriting, that she has this really strong hand. And so when I saw these letters, these originals up close, was really studying that. I wanted to really get an understanding of what type of person she was. And it was nice to be able to see a lot of that. There were some times where she would still be writing and have another thought, and she would just continue writing over the letter that she'd already written over. So it was nice to just kind of have an idea about that, but just to see what their day-to-day lives were like, it was really quite extraordinary to be able to explore that. But here, there's some beautiful language in all of these letters, and it really gives you insight into that day and age. And so the letters by Theodore Roosevelt were quite lovely as well. I actually made exact replicas of all of them so that I could take them with me and study them a little bit further, but also kind of get an understanding of what it would have been like to receive these letters. There are some of them that are quite small, actually, and they would fit, I'm sure, nice and neatly in an envelope, where there are others that are much larger. But if you want to take a closer look at some of these are written by Theodore, and they say, "Blessed little heart's darling, darling baby." I'm sure you're seeing some of these, "Darling Queenie, darling Alice." And there are so many beautiful, beautiful thoughts in all of these letters. But really what they do is they really allow the reader an understanding of their relationship. And it was very deep. Their relationship was one where they were dating, but also very intense, and the love deepened as they got to know each other. This is Alice at the center here. She really was playing hard to get for Theodore Roosevelt for quite some time, and so he had to try very hard to get her to consider dating him. And so we watched this throughout as I studied their journals and then their letters. You see her in the bigger group with her friends in Chestnut Hill. These are her cousins and her friends, but there were always beautiful group photos. And so many of the photos included men and women in them. I mean, they had a very active social life. So it was really exciting to be able to see all of that. The pictures go on and on. This one I really love. At the center, we see Alice, and there's Theodore as a student at Harvard College. He was a New Yorker, went to school at Harvard. And interestingly, some of you may know that Theodore Roosevelt had a debilitating asthma condition as a young man. So he really never attended school like other children would have in the day. So, but he was brilliant. And many say he had a photographic memory, so smart that he ended up going to Harvard College. But he didn't really have it that easy either, because New Yorkers at the time weren't all that accepted at Harvard. One of the things that was interesting at the time is there was a bit of a battle going on at Harvard for women to be allowed entrance into Harvard College to be taught by the professors. And there was a lot of work being done to convince the Harvard administration that women had brains and that they could actually complete a college course, but even more than that, complete a college degree. And so being able to include that, it was actually happening in the very same time that the two of them were dating. I really adore the third person in this picture. She was the third wheel. This is Alice's cousin Rose. And Theodore really tried hard to get Alice to take this tintype spree. I mean, there are letters back and forth, they're included in the book. And so this was a big deal for him to have a picture with Alice. He really wanted one, and he ended up getting one. This is something that I really wanted to show you because I thought you might be interested, being especially as a historical society and interested in items like this. As I was studying Theodore Roosevelt, Teddy, as she called him, he never used Teddy, never wanted to be called Teddy after Alice. But throughout their relationship, you hear her use Teddy often in the letter writing. The what you're seeing here is something I was quite stunned by. In all of the biographies of Theodore Roosevelt that I could find, they often cite 2 or 3 lines from a thesis, a senior college essay that Roosevelt handed in at Harvard. And for me, the 2 or 3 lines wasn't enough because I was really researching Theodore Roosevelt at that time. And so I really wanted to see the whole thesis. I didn't want to see just 2 or 3 lines. And so I went searching for this thesis, and it took me a really long time to be able to track this down and understand what I was looking at. The archivists at Harvard University were very kind in helping me and said in the end, you're mistaken, that this is not a thesis at all. What they're referring to, the biographers, is actually a speech that Theodore made at commencement in 1880 at Harvard. You're seeing some of these words, and it was very progressive and very forward thinking. And what shocked me was that, being that he spoke these words in front of his peers, in front of a group at Harvard, I think is quite significant. And I think opens an area of research in the Roosevelt world, especially when you look at what he's saying. As laws related to marriage, there should be the most absolute equality preserved between the 2 sexes. I mean, he goes on to say, I do not think the woman should assume the man's name. He has that underlined. After this portion, he also talks about women should have the right to be lawyers. Women should have the right to higher education. And this, again, was at the time where there was this battle going on as to whether women should be allowed to be taught by Harvard professors. So for him to say these things, I believe, is quite significant. I also know that Alice was in the audience at the time. And knowing how Theodore was speaking in his journal entries, he was certainly concerned throughout his relationship with Alice that he would lose her. So I can't imagine he would ever say anything that would have her run from him. So with all of these pieces, it was quite fascinating to look at what influence Alice may have had on Theodore Roosevelt. Here we see Alice in some of the other photos that most people had thought were destroyed, but in fact, they were being held in storage. you see her with the fan here on the far left? This is her riding in an open cart, which was not very common for women to do at that time. And then you see her again with her friends. There's also some men in that photo too, but I do love her dress, and I loved her attitude too, because I found her quite exciting, and she had quite a voice, meaning like I feel like she has a story that deserved to be told. The biographers of Theodore Roosevelt that I could see all mention Alice, of course, but they mention her in a way that I think it's just not enough. And in fact, one biographer, after seeing all this material, I went back and reviewed what they had said, and one of the biographers actually said that Alice was uncomplicated, bland, incapable of spiritual growth, and in fact went on to say, and I quote, that if Alice had stayed in Theodore's life, Theodore may have committed suicide from sheer boredom. And that is written in a biography of Theodore Roosevelt. Well, that is not at all what I was seeing. I was seeing a relationship that was so deep that if you could describe soulmates, I would describe them as soulmates. I mean, it was very intimate, their writings, very passionate, and the joy that you can read in Theodore's words was something you really would never normally see. And so that really was the impetus for me to continue the research, to see what else I could find about the two of them, and then to be able to have the opportunity to weave a novel around these historical documents. So the love letters that you read in If a Poem Could Live and Breathe, most of them have never been published, as well as this speech that he had given on women's rights and equal rights for men and women. The transcriptions I donated back to the library so that future researchers wouldn't have to go through the trouble that I was going through in order to be able to have this material in front of me. So it was quite a joy, it was quite a journey, and something I completely would do again if I had the opportunity, because it was finding a story and telling a story that I believe deserves to be told. And I was really quite thrilled to have the chance to do it. I'm open to any questions at all that you might have, whether it be about the research, about the writing, about journalism, and maybe you're considering writing your own book. Please feel free to ask me anything you would like. I am here to answer your questions.
Hey, Mary, thanks for that. We do have some questions coming in on the chat. We have a couple that are asking, where exactly are those letters stored? Is it at the Hollis Archives at Harvard?
Yes. So what I was able to find is the Hollis Archives, what you're seeing there, have most of this Library of Congress as well in regard to the journal entries. I'm just zipping back to those journal entries that you would find at the Library of Congress. What's exciting about these is that they are digitized, so you can actually read them digitally. That's wonderful. Most of these letters have not been digitized. They have just started. I think this picture may be digitized with the Hollis Archives, but most of these letters you would actually have to go and see in person. They are under not the Roosevelt collection as you would normally see them, but under the Longworth family papers. So if you're looking for them, that's where you would find them. But in the book is a very extensive information about where everything is stored in case you'd like to see them yourself.
Great. You mentioned that one biographer was quite harsh on Alice. Were others as harsh? And do you know why that one biographer was that way?
Well, the one biographer, I think that there is an explanation to some of it, that after Alice, Theodore Roosevelt didn't say even the name Alice again, and didn't write about her. And even their child was called Baby Alice, even though her name was Alice. And I think there has always been this thought that Alice was so insignificant that Theodore didn't say her name. However, I see it very differently. For me, I see a man who went through great turmoil and great emotional distress. And I think that the reason why he didn't say her name again was because he couldn't bear to say her name again. And so I really fall in that category. That's why maybe the biographers decided. It's hard to say, honestly. Um, the one that treated her harshly, I believe, put the cap on the research on Alice so that others wouldn't even consider. I mean, to talk about a woman who is uncomplicated and bland, why even bother researching her? Especially that that same biographer wrote that the love letters had been destroyed, except a few. So I think that's why these have gone without being seen for such a long time. You know, when they were donated decades ago, there was even a little exhibit at the library for, you know, the public to see them, but even that was just so small that they really have not gotten a chance to be published all these years. So that was really quite exciting. Now, why they talked about her in that way is a very good question, but one that I can't really answer because I'm not sure. I think that there may have been an understanding that sometimes women who are so forward thinking or so different, sometimes we're sort of, you know, kept down a little bit. So I mean, that's a possibility. Or there may have been you know, she did not become the first lady, and there's this thought that maybe the woman who did become the first lady, I think she added to the story of Alice a bit, and that may have been why.
Okay, we have a question asking, why did you do the story as a novel rather than straight nonfiction?
It's a great question. And one I go back and forth with, I think it could have easily been nonfiction as well. The first book I did was a novel on George Washington and his first love that was based on historic documents. And I really enjoyed being able to present different characters throughout the book and being able to develop these characters as well. I think that I keep Theodore's voice as much as possible in this book. I mean, we start with Theodore in the Dakotas, and then we go back to Cambridge and then to our area as well. And I really wanted to be able to show the life and times and everything that was happening. And the only way to do that, I felt, was through a novel. That's just sort of the best way I thought I could tell the story. But it could easily be a nonfiction, and I hope somebody decides to take that up.
What about the people that were around them? Were they supporters or detractors of this relationship?
It's a wonderful question. And I think we did see plenty of support for this relationship. In fact, I think that there was no choice in the matter. I mean, I think he was so smitten. It was hard not, it was hard to deny their relationship. I'm not sure in regard to her family, how thrilled they were that she was going to be marrying a New Yorker, but that's the sense that I got. But I did feel like their friends were trying as hard as they can to make that relationship.
And how long were they together?
So they were together 6 years, and a very intense 6 years.
Mhm. We have somebody asking, Mary, what is your next project going to be?
That's a great question. And what I would love to answer, I did start doing some research actually in regard to Abe Lincoln and his first love, who was a woman named Anne. But I am just at the very beginning of that research, and I'm not sure if I'm going to find what I need to find in order to tell a full story like this one. The being able to search in archives is something I really enjoy. I think other people might think of dusty things as just old, but to me, it's very exciting. And if I could find the pieces that I'm looking for, then I think that I will take that up. But right now, it's still a research project. So I'll let you know though if I figure it out.
Okay, great. You can come back and tell us about that when that's done. Um, can you tell us a little bit more about Alice's background? And if you don't want to ruin the story, how did she end up passing away?
Oh, sure. Well, what we do know quite a bit about Alice, and what I was able to do is research as much as I could through her own letter writing. So we do know she is a considered a Boston Brahmin, and she was 17 when she met Theodore Roosevelt. She didn't start dating him, from what I understand, until after her debutante ball. So it was exciting to be able to put the debutante ball in there. She also attended his boxing matches. So one of the chapters in the book is called Man in the Arena, and it'll be actually from Theodore's perspective as he's boxing in a quite a famous boxing match at Harvard. And that it was told by a number of his classmates. So it was really quite exciting to be able to go to the classmates' writing. So many people wrote about Theodore actually that attended Harvard with him. So I was able to see that. And I was able to actually learn quite a bit about Alice from so many others and their letter writing. So I did not only look at hers, but also those closest to them.
Okay, great. So where did you find the time to do all of this research and writing?
So this was quite a labor of love for me, and it was a 4-year project. I probably could have taken 40 years, honestly, if I had them. But what I would do is anytime that I was free or anytime I had time off, I would spend it doing the research. I know some people do different things in their free time, but for me, it was researching that I really enjoyed the most.
Did they have any children?
They had one daughter, yes. Her name is Alice, and she is a very memorable first daughter, actually. Her married name was Alice Roosevelt Longworth, and many people may know her from her sayings. One of them is, if you have nothing nice to say, come sit next to, nothing nice to say about anyone, come sit next to me. I mean, she was quite, I considered a rebel in the White House. In fact, she wanted to wear trousers and she wanted to be in the meeting with men. And so that was considered rebellious at the time. Interestingly, I was able to bring some of her character into her mom, and that was really fun to be able to do.
But how long did this process take from doing all the research and then writing it to publishing?
So I had first seen the love letters in 2019. And this was right before COVID, actually, when I was still able to go into the library. It was a really interesting story. When I was first in the library, I had had this idea that these letters might be there, because I was really only researching Alice. And so by only researching Alice, it sort of zeroed in on this collection at Harvard Library and that there were correspondence there. I was able to see that in the digital contents for the Hollis archives. So I made the request to actually go to the library and see them in person. And so I went into this beautiful old library and they said, well, choose one of these mahogany tables and you can bring in a legal pad, a phone, and a pencil. And so I had those 3 items and I found a seat at one of the tables and they brought out this beautiful box of letters. And I looked through it, but it wasn't the right one. So I sat back and waited and looked like pretty forlorn about the whole process. And the researcher came up to me and said, you know what, I think I brought you the wrong box. Hang on. And she left and came back quite a bit time later. I mean, maybe 40 minutes later. But out came this treasure trove of letters and pictures and this incredibly full story. And so I spent as much as time as I could, trying to transcribe, but realizing this was impossible. So I took digital images of all of the pictures and of all of the letters. And at the end of it, I thought, oh gosh, I should probably take a selfie of me with this. No one's going to believe that they're right here and I'm with them. And so I took this silly selfie. And right behind me, as I was taking this picture, was a giant portrait of Theodore Roosevelt. And I thought, oh boy, I hope he's okay with this because I really feel like I'm intruding.
It's funny. We got some more questions coming in, if you don't mind. Were you able
Not
to do any genealogy on Alice's side of the family? And did you find any living relatives who had any interesting stories that have been passed down?
I did. It was really quite exciting. So let me see if you can see. So Rose, who is sitting just to the left of Alice. I had a chance to speak with her relatives, the Sultan Stalls, three of them, in fact, and it was really exciting to be able to understand what their life was like. They lived right next door to Alice, the cousins, and that's how Alice first met Theodore. They told some wonderful stories and really pointed me in the direction of some of the classmates who had writings about that time, and that was really helpful. I also spoke with a great grandson of Theodore Roosevelt, who was very, very helpful and helped me connect to other areas of for research, through Sagamore Hill, through the Teddy Roosevelt sites, and through the Birthplace Museum, through the Inauguration Museum. So it was really, really thrilling, actually, to be able to talk to so many of them as well.
Oh, that's excellent. Did the death of Alice cause Roosevelt to go into a depression? And do you think that's what made him to find solace in the outdoors?
So the story is one that's quite devastating, and I think that for Theodore, there was no other way to get past this. He had to grieve in private. I believe he was so madly in love with Alice, and I don't think there would have been any other way for him to handle what he had to in order to get past that. Many people know that not only did Alice die, but his mother died in the same 24-hour period in the same house, and I think that was more than he could handle.
Yeah. Let's see. Okay, somebody has a comment about researching Lincoln's romance, a book called Soul of Anne Rutledge. And Mary, where can people find this new novel of yours?
So If a Poem Could Live and Breathe is available everywhere, ebook, audiobook, at independent bookstores or Amazon or anywhere you buy your books. And it just came out on Valentine's Day, which was a significant day in the life of Theodore Roosevelt.
Great. We have one last question here, I think. Is there anything you found out that surprised you that you'd like to tell us about?
Honestly, I guess what surprised me most was that there was so much material that had not been published before, and that she had such a story to tell, and that she had such an influence on his life. That really surprised me. I don't think I had ever really seen that before. See, he entered Harvard wanting to be a naturalist, an observer of nature, and he left wanting to be a political reformer and go into government. And to be able to see that, I believe she had such an influence on him, that was really what surprised me most, I think. And just the fact that there was so much to be found. I just, oftentimes you think everything has been found, but really there's so much more still to be found.
Yeah, that is surprising. If we don't have any other questions, Mary, I think we're going to say thank you. We appreciate you being here. This was really fun.
Well, thank you. It's been such a pleasure, and I really appreciate it. Thank you. Thanks,
Great.
everyone.
And good luck with the book.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot, everybody.